Sonoma Brain Trust. I am Chelsie Runnings with Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, and I have Daren Blonski, financial advisor with Sonoma Wealth Advisors, and we have LoriBeth. She is a legal analyst with Haeuser, Valluzzo, Piasta with us today, and we are going to pick up a little bit where we left off last week on Proposition 19 in California, dive a little more into some of the implications of transferring before February, and LoriBeth is also going to dive into the commercial aspect of Prop 19. But just really quickly, before we get into that, I'm sure you are all aware we have COVID shutdowns again, so LoriBeth is going to give us a very quick rundown, because I know we are all sick of hearing about it, of what's happening with these shutdowns.
Well, what's happening with these shutdowns, Governor Gavin Newsom is trying to get a head start on the entire shutdown. So specifically for Sonoma County, tonight at midnight, all non-essential travel, I mean, obviously if you're going to work or you need to shop, those activities are okay. But once again, if you need to go get a haircut, you might want to try to squeeze into today. There's not going to be any wine tasting permitted, although you can, of course, still have outdoor dining. And so also, too, with certain schools that were able to get exemptions, they are going to continue to be able to have school for the designated times and days. But really, you just need to hang tight. And this is a 3-week order that is going to, go to January 9th. So you want to mark your calendars. And again, of course, as January 9th approaches, there's going to be a look to see, have we been able to have more than a 15% vacancy rate in the ICU hospitals. And if not, I would imagine that it would continue. So that's the update.
Daren, is this affecting, I know it doesn't affect, the local level, but are talks of shutdowns again affecting our markets?
I think for the most part, the markets are dismissing it. They're looking through the cold winter ahead of us with COVID, looking towards fiscal stimulus. We've had some weakness in the markets this week, but some of it just is kind of run-of-the-mill corrections. There's 2 big events coming up this weekend that should have some impact one way or the other. We are on the precipice of a potential government shutdown if the lawmakers can't come to some consensus today. But over in Britain, we've got Brexit happening on Sunday, potentially. So those 2 events could send some volatility into the markets on Monday, albeit, I think the general consensus from the market is that we're going to get more fiscal stimulus. That's money getting sent out to everybody by Congress and the Senate and whatnot. And then I think that's the current consensus, that eventually a deal is going to get made. And so the markets, I think, feel supported by that. We aren't seeing big sell-offs, even as we've seen cases spike. I think the markets understand what COVID is now, understands how it kind of happens, and that the government will likely prop up the markets and continue doing so.
Gotcha. Well, back to Prop 19, because I know this is a very hot topic and everybody seems to really be trying to find ways to get around the increased property taxes. I know that a lot of people are very unhappy with Prop 19 and they are trying to find loopholes. So I jumped on a forum yesterday of real estate investors to try to get an idea of what their thoughts were on it. And I saw them coming up with all kinds of creative strategies, none of which I think are actually going to really work. But LoriBeth, can you give us a couple, maybe a rundown quickly of what some implications are of people who want to transfer their properties prior to February?
Sure, Chelsie, but before that, what have people been chattering about as a workaround, just to kind of give a cautionary tale?
Yeah, so I've seen some people were talking about doing rights of survivorship. I've seen some people were discussing creating irrevocable trusts. And I actually took some notes. I saw another one. They wanted to put their children on the deeds of their property right now. And then I also saw people discussing doing a 1031 exchange and purchasing property out of California, which I think would have some issues with more tax problems down the road.
Right. So I would also, each one of those options may or may not work. Once again, I always like to disclaim, this is just really 30,000 foot level discussions, and to bring it in for a landing for any particular client, we would need to look at their asset portfolios, specifically, obviously, the real property. I would add to that list, and this draws on my experience from when I used to work for the various county assessors' offices. I did specifically work in the exclusion and exemption department. So I would review quite a few transactions actually before they recorded, because they wanted to ensure that their transaction would not be subject to reassessment. It is a lot easier to look at it beforehand than thinking it's going to work and then try to unwind it afterwards if for some unfortunate reason it didn't qualify. So I was able to really reach out to the law community and give some discussions for the local chapter of the state bar. And so it pretty soon became, I was the go-to person to play the what if scenarios. Well, what if we do this? What if we do that? So like some of the things you were mentioning, what if we do a 1031 out of the state of California, or we add a child as a joint tenant, or some type of irrevocable trust. And an irrevocable trust may work. Other ideas are where people put their properties into a family type of entity, an LLC or an LLP. And those things can work, because here's the unfortunate thing, especially if you're a child watching this and you know that it's your parents' intent to pass on property to you. If you are down to one parent, this really becomes vital, because once that parent dies, the property is reassessed. And at that point, it's incumbent upon whoever the successor trustee or administrator of the estate to assist in filing some type of exclusion or exemption from that reassessment. And so you really have to take things under consideration. And if you want to go ahead and make these transfers now before the deadline, and it's always worth mentioning the deadline again, which is February 15th. And one of the things that Daren brought up and about losing out on the step up in basis, and just to refresh, the step up in basis occurs when the person who owns the property, we'll just call them the parent, when the parent passes away, it's the market value on their date of death. So later on, if they've successfully passed the property to their child, and it's been exempted, so they maintain their Prop 13, their low base year value. So it's the difference between that value and the value that they would sell the property at. So you kind of want to freeze frame it at that step up in value on the date that the parent dies. And then when the child decides that they want to sell the property. So that way they're not having to pay the entire capital gains amount from the date of acquisition to the date of sale. So some of the things you really want to consider is, this capital gains tax and the step up in value and how they play off of one another. It's absolutely Biden's agenda. He's made no concealment of the fact he wants to do away with the whole step up in basis altogether. So that is probably going to happen. And so you kind of take that out of the equation. You can run a couple of scenarios where it's in the equation, where it's out of the equation. So there is definitely some scenarios that you could run. And what you need to know is where the crossover point is. So what do I mean by that crossover point? So again, this is just very generic discussion. So you have to decide what the holding period is. Well, the holding period can be determined by how long the parent wants to hold the property, or to put a fine point on it, how long the life expectancy of the parent is likely to be. So you need to figure out this holding period by whatever means you want to assign a value to holding period. Then you need to also look at the factor of how much taxes you're saving during that holding period time. You also need to come up with some type, and this is where you would come in, Chelsie, some type of projected real estate appreciation amount during that same period of time. And so maybe you chime in and say, well, historically the appreciation rate of real estate in California has been this, so we expect that trend to continue. So you would put that in as well. Then you would have to look at the appreciation, and if you were to sell at the end of that holding period, so you compare that amount of profit minus the amount of the capital gains tax, which is 15% for everybody right now. But again, all these factors can and may change during the holding period. So you take this appreciation amount of sale less the capital gains, and then the holding period, and you see where that break-even point is. And if that makes sense, that you would be selling anyway, there's really no reason you would transfer the property. However, if you're going to continue on, then you really want to consider holding on to that. And again, this is really strategic with commercial property considerations. Another thing, we focused last week on primary residences, and I can only speak for myself. I recently had an elderly parent who passed away. They passed the primary residence to us children, but because we didn't even have to consider this draconian law that's coming into place, we got this property transferred to us at the low tax rate. We turned this primary residence into a commercial property. What does that mean? That means we had a parent who lived there, who no longer lived there, but we are able to use it as an income property. And we are enjoying the low tax base. So that's another consideration that you want to think about. Even though it's the parent's primary residence now, would we have an interest in turning that into some type of commercial venture? So, and the final thing I would have people consider is, maybe your parents have a primary residence that you want to turn into a commercial property. They have a second home that you would also want to do the same thing. And maybe they have a couple other rental properties or stores or industrial buildings or going concerns. So it really depends on the amount and the category of the types of commercial properties. If your parents are making a good living just managing these income type properties and they really want to pass them to you, I would really have you come in and get the portfolio evaluated, as I said, with all these factors and considerations, and really look at, transferring the commercial properties if it makes sense. after you've run these scenarios. But I would really encourage people to make this deadline, because unlike the primary residence, it is black and white with the commercial properties.
So, LoriBeth, I was speaking with an attorney this week about this topic in a client case we're dealing with, where we're trying to help them with making the assessment on whether or not it makes sense to do a transfer now or wait till the parents pass. And the attorney brought up a really interesting point, and she's like, the thing is there's going to be a huge backlog of these properties getting processed and if you don't get it in early, we don't know if it's even going to get through. And I can't help but think that there's going to be some busy folks down in the state government here, all the local governments taking care of these in processing these transfers. Have you heard whether or not there'll be any extension granted if literally, especially with COVID, there's a chance that a lot of these transfers don't even get processed in time?
Well, Daren, Deva is the recorder for Sonoma County, and I used to work with her. And you would want to check with the recorder's office. But what they do is, they're going to stamp any transfers of real property. And what the backlog would be is actually enrolling them on the tax roll. So again, I wouldn't let that deter you from trying. And I would highly encourage you, again, to empirically run through these scenarios using these factors. And I'm sure there's a few others that could be added as well. But
I think that's the challenge, right, LoriBeth? Because it's the empirical, if you're a math mind and you understand these things, then it's, not that big of a computation. But if your mind isn't that way, and I've certainly talked to a handful of clients who are just like, I have no idea what my attorney's even saying to me at this moment. Translate this for me. And that's, I think, the challenge is people really getting their head around it. And the way kind of breaking, and correct me if I'm incorrect in this, but it really all comes down to, do you think you're going to sell that property in your lifetime or not if you stand to inherit a property? And if you think you're going to hold on to the property, then you need to look at, can you hold on to the property? Do you have enough other assets that will be able to support your retirement, et cetera? Because what you don't want to do is give up a step up trying to save some tax costs, and then put yourself in a not such a great position from a capital gains perspective down the road if you have to unload that property. And which is really difficult to do, because to forward look like that and to say, I don't think I'll ever sell this property. And many of the clients I've spoken to, they're on that edge where they might have enough assets to support their retirement, but what if they have a stroke? What if they have some exogenous health shock to their overall retirement plan, forcing them to sell a property that was transferred to them prior to their parents passing, so they didn't have that step up? That's the scenario I worry about for individuals, is that they don't effectively calculate what the true cost of retirement is. And so I think that's understanding what the true cost of your retirement is going to be, and what resources you have to support that cost, I think are really, really essential when making this assessment.
I absolutely would agree, Daren. And again, I just want to, if I could convey one thought today, would really be that holding period, because death is a forced sale. And so you will be reassessed. In February, it's going to be after the deadline, it's going to be really harsh. And those choices will be taken from you. I mean, in my own instance, where I was able to turn my parents' primary residence into a commercial situation, I have to sit now and think about, well, do I want to go ahead and pass that to my children? And there's nothing to prevent my children and I from coming up with some type of agreement as to the income during my life and then after I pass. You know, there are creative ways. It's not like my children are going to go, haha, now you've transferred it to us and you're out.
You hope.
So again, if there is concern about that, there are creative options about, again, putting it in a family-owned entity, and where these bylaws and specific details of how the income and flows through to the various members and owners is spelled out. And so I just think it is just so important to really get a handle on this holding period, whether it's, actuarially, you can even go on the Social Security website and look and see how long they think you're going to live, or versus, a strategic business plan of just when it makes sense to sell a property, the timing. To get a handle on that, run it through the scenarios and come up with your plan before the deadline. Yes, it seems quick, but we're here to help review. We're here to take the sting out of it and just really break it down so that it makes more sense to your particular situation.
That's why it's so important that you align yourself with trusted professional advisors who can help you make the right decision, because putting it into a trust or doing a 1031 or all these various scenarios I was reading last night seem easy enough, but nothing is ever as cut and dry as that, especially when it comes to taxes and real estate and protecting your family's generational wealth or whatever you want to call it. You need to have a strong team of advisors that you can trust that can help you make these decisions, and don't just go out there and make these decisions on a whim because someone online told you to.
Right. Perfect.
Well, and it's a multifaceted decision. And I think it's, there's tax consequences, there's legal consequences, there's what's your financial plan consequences. And all of that, I think, is built into this decision, which, some people will just stick their heads in the sand and it will be what it will be. And other people will plan strategically. And that's why I always say there's, the rules for the informed and the rules for the uninformed. And it's, I think really, really important in this case that people do the education. They reach out to people like LoriBeth, Chelsie, like you, that understand how real estate transfers through generations, and get a plan put in place. This is a huge opportunity for people, at least I say, make a decision about, right? Maybe you do nothing, but make a decision one way or the other. Don't just let time make a decision for you.
I really like that thought, Daren, because if you don't run it through a scenario, by default, you've foreclosed on your options. And again, if you're getting up in years, or you have a parent who's getting up in years, it would make sense if, as part of their estate plan already, their intent is clear that they are going to be passing on these properties to you. You can have a robust discussion with them and say, Mom, Dad, I don't really necessarily want to live in the primary residence, but it would make a great income opportunity for me later. And, go ahead and get that property transferred, and then you can maintain that low tax basis and come to other formal agreements with them. So you have to really inform yourself. And if you have these legacy properties and you have these going concerns, that's how your parents have made all their income, is from commercial property. And they, again, have really detailed their intent to want to go ahead and pass that on to you, or, you know, to their children, you know, come and have a discussion about how that can still happen, because I cannot emphasize enough, after February 15th, you know, once you pass away, that is going to get reassessed, and the taxes are going to really just possibly force you to have to sell. Right now, you have the option of passing on $1 million in assessed value, and that can translate to multiple properties. And you can do this now, but if you pass away, you're after February 15th, it's all going to get reassessed, and you're potentially passing on a huge tax burden to your children. And that is going to cut way into any potential income profits that they were making prior. So that also would need to be part of one of those factoring scenarios that you would run. You know, what are the benefits now, and what would it look like after the deadline? So again, come talk to us. Let us help you sort this out. It's a huge task, but we can look and evaluate all your holdings and run it through some scenarios so you can make this very important and informed decision timely. I mean, we're all going to be on lockdown for these 3 weeks. This is the perfect time to get this part of your life situated.
Anyone who owns real estate who plans to pass it down to their children, or they're planning their future legacies, take the next 3 weeks to assess and reassess. Reach out to your advisors, LoriBeth, Daren, Mary. Reach out to me if you want to talk about the real estate market or what's going to be happening in the next couple of years. But reach out to us, because that's what we're all here for. We're here to bring you guys facts, not fiction and fear that you read online. We're here to help you. So just make sure you use these next 3 weeks wisely while you can.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you, LoriBeth. We appreciate you taking time to join us this morning, and wish everyone a nice week, healthy week. Be safe.